Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us here. I'm Katie Earle, and I coordinate our University Express program, and I work for the Erie County Department of Senior Services. And we're really excited to have a panel this morning talking about Buffalo, the city of good food neighbors. I won't spoil anything. I'll just go through my quick housekeeping here before we get going. You just heard me say that we're recording this session, and if all goes as planned, I'll be able to post it on our website in the near future. As folks are talking and giving their presentations, feel free to put your questions and comments into the chat right when you think of them, and we'll get to them in the time that we have. So if you're new to us, your chat's located at the lower right-hand side of your screen. Just click that, expand it, and send your questions to me. Don't forget to press send, or it's just going to hang out there. And if you're on a tablet or smartphone, touch your screen, that brings up your control panel, and there you'll find your chat. So I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to turn it over to Caitlin, and then we'll learn about everyone else who's here. So thank you all so much.
Great. Thank you, Katie. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to Buffalo, City of Good Food Neighbors, Part 2. I'm really happy that you're joining us here today. So today we're going to sit down, as Katie mentioned, virtually with a few of our neighbors to learn more about their organizations and the services that they offered, how they got started with community gardening or urban farming, and then we'll have some time for Q&A. So again, if you did bring some of your own questions, go ahead and put those in the chat box, and we'll get to those when the time comes. So I'll introduce myself first. My name is Caitlin Tucker, and I work for the Cornell Vegetable Program. We are a regional Cornell Cooperative Extension team that serves vegetable growers across 14 counties in Western New York. We do serve commercial vegetable growers. So if you are a community gardener or a backyard gardener, that really doesn't fall under our umbrella. And we're happy to direct you to your local county extension office. I am housed here in Erie County, and I do work in different areas of our region on various topics, as does everyone on our team. But over the last 3.5 years, I've been working a great deal with urban farms in the city of Buffalo. And before we jump into today's presentation, I want to share that if you weren't able to join us for part 1, you can view that recording on the Erie County, New York YouTube page. So in this presentation, I shared a bit about what urban agriculture is, what it looks like in Buffalo, talked about things like how our farmers and community gardeners are growing, services, again, that they're providing to their communities. And I touched on a number of challenges that these growers experience related to soil health, water access, land access, and then I introduced some organizations you can connect with if you'd like to learn more. So again, check that first recording out if you get a chance. But today we're here to sit down with some of these organizations. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to Grassroots Gardens of Western New York, Urban Fruits and Veggies / Buffalo Go Green, and 5 Loaves Farm. So I'm going to give each of these organizations some space to share their work in their own words. And first up, we have Chen, Program Manager, joining us from Grassroots Gardens. So Tim, at this time, feel free to unmute yourself, introduce yourself, and share a bit about your organization.
Sure. Thanks, Caitlin, and thanks for the beautiful slide. It looks great. I think just give me a heads up if you want me to wrap up to make sure I give folks enough time. So my name is Tim Chen. I am the program manager at Grassroots Gardens of Western New York. We're a small nonprofit that works primarily in the cities of Buffalo and Niagara Falls. And our primary goal in the work that we do is working with communities to support them in establishing community gardens in their neighborhoods. So what that looks like is we partner and support over 100 community gardens and school gardens across the Buffalo and Niagara Falls regions. And there are a lot of pieces that come into working with these different communities, but primarily it really focuses on the core idea that we are not trying to go around and establish gardens. willy-nilly in any vacant lot that we see in the city. It's really when neighborhoods and communities and block clubs and schools approach us and say, hey, we have this small critical mass of people who really want a garden in this neighborhood. What can you do for us? That's when we kind of step in and help out. So the support can look like a number of things. If you are from kind of the Buffalo or Niagara Falls area, you probably know that there are plenty of vacant lands across the city, and most of these are city-owned lots. So one of the biggest things that we can do for communities is to work with the city to hammer out the leases, provide insurance for folks to start building gardens. Another piece that we really focus on is equity in terms of food access and food justice. Making sure that communities who maybe don't have immediate access to fresh food or affordable grocery stores can grow their own fresh produce. So we really try to make sure that we're giving folks all the resources to start out so they can have a good, comprehensive, and safe growing experience. So what that looks like is providing lumber, people power, volunteer groups to help folks build beds, order soil and compost that's organic and screened, get them seedlings every season so they can get started, and provide ongoing technical support in terms of any questions they might have as far as growing, and directing them to other resources that they might be able to utilize. So those are a couple of the kind of the big pieces that we do year in and year out. There are a couple of other services here and that Caitlin has listed. These include some of our other initiatives that are kind of more focus group related. For example, the Therapeutic Gardening Initiative is really focused on using these garden spaces for folks to process grief. And there are other, there's another piece actually that isn't, oh, no, it's here. Gardening for All Accessibility Task Force is another piece that we're doing, is trying to make a lot of our gardens more accessible to folks who are differently abled, who might need wheelchairs or walkers or so on and so forth. So that's something that we just started, I feel like, actually doing the tangible work in the last year or two. And it's a lot, but we're slowly kind of looking for more gardens to make the paths wider, level out the ground, building grass mats so wheelchairs can go through more easily. And then finally, the other big piece here that is a pretty new update is we just got accredited as an official land trust by the the Land Trust Alliance, which is a national organization that accredits different organizations for land trust status. So what that really means is, in addition to being a small nonprofit, we now have the ability to own some of these city lots, which will look like us purchasing lots from the city. That's especially important in Buffalo, where, especially in the last year or two, housing and property values have gone up exponentially. It's a really good place for developers to try to scoop up land and speculate. And if there are neighborhoods where vacant lots are at risk of being sold off to developers, the highest bidders, often who are people who don't live in the neighborhood and just sit on a piece of land and wait for the value to appreciate, we are able to ideally hold these pieces of land in trust for the community and make sure that we're preserving them for community use, whether it's green space, whether it's gardening. That's an ability that we now have, and we're slowly kind of mapping out what that process looks like, especially now that the election season is over and we know which administration we'll be working with. Things will be starting to move forward with the city and the council members that we're talking to. So we're very excited about that. It's also a big chunk of work that we are taking on with a very small staff team of 4 people, including myself. But it's exciting, and we're looking forward to doing a lot of planning this winter.
Great, thank you, Tim. Anything else you want to add before we move into Matt's introduction?
I guess one thing I've neglected to mention is we also work quite a bit with schools. So what that looks like is one of our staff team will work with teachers. He does a lot of curriculum creation. He'll also go into schools and help facilitate garden lessons when teachers ask for that support. So that's something that is also pretty exciting, especially considering kind of with all the COVID precautions. It has been really tough for schools to do after school programming But I think outdoor garden spaces are relatively safer compared to trying to do after school programs indoors. So that's been a nice thing throughout the last 2 years.
Great. And I do have Tim's contact information on this slide, but I'll have it again at the end if you don't have a chance to write it down. So we're going to move into Five Loaves Urban Farm introduction. And so we have Matt Kauffman here to talk about their farm and how they got started. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Matt.
Sounds good. Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you for having us here today. The Five Loaves Farm is a ministry of the Buffalo Vineyard Church. We're located on the upper west side of Buffalo and right around Public School 19. And we've been there since 2012 is when we started growing the actual gardens on lots. And we actually started as an after-school program. We ran our own after-school program for a while. We partnered with some organizations to run an after-school program. And over the last 5 years or so, we've shifted to the paid internships for neighborhood that we're focusing on and really being about job skill development and employment opportunities for high schoolers mostly. And we partner still with 716 Ministries and their work readiness program to help make that happen. But yeah, we grow a little bit of a lot of different crops, probably too many different crops. We have probably over 70 different crops that we're growing between our perennials and annuals throughout our about acre of land that we have. Again on the west side, and we just finished our 9th season of offering a CSA program. This year we had about 40 families from the community that would come and pick up produce for 22 weeks from June through October, right at our farm site. With that we provide a sliding scale pay as you can payment option for that. So it's been great to see we've been able to maintain a portion of about 20% of our CSA for folks that fall on the low income side of that scale. And so some people are giving more to help offset others that need it, at least during the season of life, need help with paying for this fresh, delicious food that we're growing for them. So yeah, that's our CSA program. We have an on-site farm stand that we do during the summer months, and then we also are at a couple of different farmers markets. We've been at the Chandler Street Winter Market in the early spring, and then at the Bidwell Elmwood Village Farmers Market during the summer months. So we also this year participated in the Farm to School program with the Buffalo Public Schools. And so some of our produce goes right across the street to School 19, as well as it's gone into Lafayette High School, School 45 on the side as well. And lastly, we also try and partner with other organizations like the Massachusetts Avenue Project that are directly getting food out to the food insecure in our city. So we also sell to market to help distribute food out to the people most need access to it.
And I'm sorry, I might have missed this. You also have this really cool farmhouse space, correct?
Yep. So about 5 years ago, we were able to partner with another nonprofit foundation connected through our church and redevelop an abandoned home that was right next to the garden space. And that turned into the Five Loaves Farmhouse, which has a really great kitchen in it and a cool event space for smaller groups, which has actually been pretty good during the pandemic, where people aren't looking for huge gatherings. But before the pandemic, we would say it holds about 40 people, but it's been used a lot for gatherings of about 20 folks now, and fits that nicely. And yeah, is set right on the farm. So it's used, and that is also available as a pay-as-you-can on a pay-as-you-can scale as well. So trying to, the west side is a pretty diverse part of the city, and it's become actually even increasingly socioeconomically diverse. So we're trying to maintain a space where we're only a block from Niagara Street, where a lot of redevelopment has happened, but trying to maintain a space that's also affordable for people of any socioeconomic background. So it's been really neat to see that happen, to see lots of families from the community use it. It's usually booked every weekend, all 3 days through the weekend, and for various other groups, organizations using the space throughout the week even as well. And it's a really great resource for us to use, especially with our youth that we work with in the kitchen, and space there too for us to process some of the excess food that comes off the farm. Yeah, I think that much captures who we are and what we're doing.
Great. Thanks, Matt. And, we are going to dive into more questions. And so we'll continue learning about all of these organizations in the latter half of this presentation. Now I want to move to Urban Fruits and Veggies and Buffalo Go Green, two organizations that Allison DeHonney is involved with. Allison, if you're ready at this point, you can unmute yourself and share a bit about all of the work you do around urban agriculture in Buffalo.
Sure. Thank you, Caitlin. Thanks for inviting me to be part of this panel. I am the founder and operator of Urban Fruits and Veggies and Buffalo Go Green. We're a hybrid. Urban Fruits and Veggies is a for-profit, and Buffalo Go Green is our not-for-profit arm. And we have a 30 raised bed and greenhouse urban farm on Buffalo's east side that has been in operation for almost 6 years now. And we are working on our second location, which will be greenhouses, a mixture of soil and hydroponic growing. So we decided to address the challenge of access for fresh fruits and vegetables in underserved communities. And while we are growers, our overarching mission is wellness and focusing on health inequities in underserved communities. So we go all the way from planting the seeds to making sure that what is on your table is healthy and nutritious, which is when I started this business, I thought that access was going to be, all that was necessary, and quickly found out that education and addressing the social determinants of health that go along with lack of access and lack of nutrition and wellness education all intersect. So we do keep in mind and try to address some of the social determinants of health as we make our way through the community, providing access and education to healthy meal options and healthy product options. So we are pretty much vegetable production, but we do work with the Western New York Land Conservancy to grow some native plants that are in places like the Niagara Gorge and in other places around Western New York, where the Land Conservancy is trying to take out invasives and replace them with native plants. But mainly we're in our mobile market around mainly the city of Buffalo, but we do have some suburban locations that we go to throughout the growing season. Again, not only providing access, but education. And we do that mainly through a couple of our programs. Our longest running program, and what I consider to be our most successful program, and one that I'm most passionate about, is our fruits and vegetables prescription program, where we partner with doctors who believe in food as medicine and we partner with clinics that also believe in food as medicine. It's very important to make sure that you're aligned in your goal when you're partnering with these clinics and physicians. And so we found two great partners that we've been working with over the years to target their population that struggles with diet-related diseases. We do cooking demonstrations. We try to do a few a year to open up the growing season, one during the middle of the season, and then one usually in October or November where we close out the season with some cooking demonstrations, nutrition education, and food giveaways. One of our newest programs that we launched is our Fresh Take Healthy Meal program. We were approached by some members of the community who wanted to do something as a result of COVID. And one of the solutions that we came up with was to provide fresh take meals, which would use local artisans and local vegetable and fruit producers. We are trying to focus on urban farms first, and then go out to rural farms and then supplement with anything on a state or national level when we're preparing these meals. These meals are culturally appropriate, and as we grow this program, we hope to make them more targeted towards nutrition as well. We don't do any of this work alone. We have amazing partners, Cornell being one of our main partners, the University of Buffalo Food Lab and the Masters of Public Health Department. Again, like I said, we partner with clinics and physicians. We partner with other community-based organizations, and part of this work has landed us in a social justice and equity space. So we are now expanding our partnerships from just local to statewide and national, partnering with Black Farmers United New York State, Black Farmer Fund, and other organizations that are working on social justice issues. One being reclaiming land for Black, Indigenous, and people of color, which would be the Northeast Farmers of Color Land Trust. We work with some partners who, the Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus, working with some physicians there that are really trying to focus on healthy meal distribution. That is pretty much an outline of what we do on a daily basis and our larger mission and vision.
Thank you, Allison. That was wonderful. So at this point, I want to transition into the Q&A portion. And if I think we do have a couple questions in the chat. I will take a look at that in a second. If you are not sure what kind of questions you have, I do have this list of topics here that we can choose from. So we can either take questions from participants in the chat box, or you can type in the chat box a topic that we can dive into. For now, I'm going to quickly address the questions in the chat, and then maybe someone out there has a topic in mind and we can select one of those. So we have a question for Matt. Can you tell us about some of the crops that you grow at 5 Loaves?
So yeah, we, as I said, we grow over 70 different crops. So quite a few things, but you know, with the CSA program, trying to provide variety throughout the seasons as we grow. But we've also tried to focus, as Allison was pointing out, we too got into this work thinking that access was the big barrier, but there's so many different aspects of access, right? And so the cultural significance of food is a big part of that. And so we've been focusing for the last couple of years on trying to grow a couple of crops that maybe wouldn't be normally found in traditional North American agriculture, but are significant to the people groups that located in our city and our neighborhood. So, and a lot of that ends up getting distributed through the Massachusetts Avenue Project's mobile market. So things like sour cucumbers or specific versions of eggplants that are usually used by Eastern and Northern African groups. And then what are some other ones that we have? Hot peppers, obviously. Also some gourds and squashes that are specific to some of the Southeast Asian populations that are part of our neighborhood. So yeah, so we're growing some of those things, but then all the other traditional, broccoli, carrots, onions, tomatoes, peppers, all of those things. We have even tried to, one of the first things that our neighbors ask us for every year is, when is the corn going to be ready? And we actually have grown a patch of corn, of sweet corn, every year that we've been here. But I think this is our last year that we're going to be growing any sweet corn, because it's always such a struggle on such a small space to have justify using the limited space that we have to grow crops like that. Watermelons are another one that's like that. Again, those are two of the most popular things that our neighbors are always asking for. We do have a little bit of space that we use for things like that, but we're trying to focus on the crops that we can that maximize the space. Again, being in an urban space, the space that we have is limited. So we focus a lot on greens and salad greens. We have salad greens growing on the farm year round, including in our high tunnel and houses that we have. We aren't necessarily harvesting them past the middle of December and into January and February, but there's stuff that's being overwintered in our houses that we can then get in right at the beginning of March and start harvesting again. So that's probably the most specialized crop that we have, or the thing that we focus on the most is growing a salad mix that we have available once a year or so.
We have a follow-up question, and I'll open this up to the other panelists as well if they have anything to add. Are you tending to any fruit trees?
So we do have a few fruit trees. We actually started out with raspberry bushes around to try and provide some kind of a living fence around our properties. So raspberries have been the biggest fruit production that we've had on our farm, has come from our different varieties of raspberries. Some strawberry patches have really taken off in the last couple of years as well. The fruit trees, yeah, I mean, we started 10 years ago and they've been planted along the way. It takes 5 years or so to get any kind of meaningful crop off of most of them. And again, we're not certified organic, but we're trying to minimize the amount of sprays and toxins that we're putting on our food. And fruit, especially tree fruit, is really challenging that way to grow marketable fruit that without doing that. That being said, we did bring to market pears, apples, and plums this year from our fruit trees. So not a lot of them, but some.
Tim, do you see a lot of fruit trees or other types of fruit being grown at the community gardens that you work with?
Not that much actually. There's a couple, just a few gardens that have maybe apple and pear trees, but I would say it's probably under, I think it's probably under 15 gardens that have fruit trees to my knowledge. So it's a small portion of the gardens that we work with. Maybe one of the more unique fruit trees that I've seen is there's one garden that has just a ton of mulberry trees, which actually, Caitlin, you visited with me, I think.
Yeah.
But otherwise, yeah, there's not a ton of fruit trees. Most of our gardens do focus on veggies. And then there are a couple of gardens that are just ornamental perennial flowers. So.
And Allison, you shared that you primarily grow vegetables. Does Urban Fruits and Veggies have any plans to expand to fruit production in the future?
We'd very much like to expand to fruit production. Myself and my farm manager, we did take one of the Cornell Small Farms courses, but we do need to probably take some more of the courses and figure out how we're going to do that. One of my concerns is if we plant trees, how much of the soil uptake gets into the trees, because all of our locations, have heavy metals and we don't know what in the actual soil in the ground. So that's a concern. So that's something that I need to investigate and figure out and then determine how we move forward from there. But yes, I would very much like to get into fruit production. It's something that would increase our revenue because there's such a high demand for fruit. And our partnerships with rural farms, we spend a lot of money on purchasing fruit from them. And rightfully so. It's a lot of work to, grow strawberries and harvest strawberries and get them to the city. So we totally understand the price point, but if we could start to grow some of that ourselves, it would be great, not only for our customers, but to help grow our business as well.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned heavy metals in soil, and I think that that's a good segue into talking about safe soil practices. I think this is probably a topic we should touch on to some extent. So I guess we can just touch on one question here, unless people would like to go through these other questions. But obviously, heavy metal contamination is an issue in urban spaces. So my question for the panelists is, what is one practice you follow or you ask your community gardeners to follow in order to minimize risks from soil contamination? And maybe we can start in the order that you introduced yourself. So with Tim, followed by Matt, and then Allison.
Sure. Sorry, Caitlin, do you want us to try to answer, go through all three questions as best we can, or just the first one for now?
I think just we can do the first one, and if people are really interested in this topic, we can address the others.
Perfect. So for the first one, all our gardens, I think I mentioned this, all our gardens, we ask that any food that they produce is grown in raised beds for this specific reason. We unfortunately don't have the capacity or the funding to run tests for every single one of our gardens, especially since different parts of the plot of land can potentially have different levels of contamination based on the activity before. So we make sure that we provide grant funding and support for folks to have raised beds built. With our staff going out to help out, we buy the lumber, and then we also get soil delivered from different vendors. Right now, we're mostly using CJ Krantz, which is out in clearance, and they have screened organic soil that we get delivered, and we support all that with grant funding for our gardens that are starting out. So another thing we make sure we do is putting in kind of the weed barrier on the bottom, which not only prevents weeds from coming up through the raised bed, but ideally can prevent the roots from going too deep. But we have kind of, we make sure our raised beds are at least 10 to 12 inches off the ground to try to minimize the risk of roots going deeper and potentially taking up things from the soil.
Great. What are your thoughts, Matt?
So we are growing in the ground. We have tested our soil when we started, and we just reran our soil test this year to monitor what the levels of contamination might be in our soil. And so starting out, there were especially things like lead, or there were some elevated levels, but we tried to either work around those places. We brought in lots of, like Tim was talking about, we have raised beds as well, but they're not separated from the soil under them. But we have invested quite a bit in bringing in topsoil and compost to build the beds on top of the existing soil that was there. And adding a lot of peat moss and the compost, lots of organic matter monitoring our pH and making sure that that's at a level that minimizes the uptake of these heavy metals into the produce. And again, when we retested, there was minimal, we weren't above the levels for any. Yeah. So we were able to, nurture soil health and build soil on top of the native soil that is safe for us to grow food.
And Five Loaves, along with I believe Grassroots and Urban Fruits and Veggies, have signed the Greater Buffalo Urban Growers Safe Soil Pledge. Is that correct?
That's correct. I was going to mention that, Kate.
Yeah,
Yes.
great. Go, yeah, jump in, Allison.
So we basically, everything that Tim said is exactly what we do for our growing. Everything's in raised beds. We even put raised beds inside of our greenhouses because, as Matt said, it's a huge investment for small farms and farms on the scale that we're on to invest in remediation and testing and constant paying attention to the soil. So there's that investment, but then there's also the investment to purchase and bring soil in from outside of the city. That is, it should be, and it is kind of seamless to our customers, which is the way we want it, but it's also, I think, important for customers to understand that pretty much all of the urban farms that I'm aware of, there may be a few outliers, but most of us, that is our goal. We're low pesticide or no pesticides, chemical pesticides, and we are either planting in raised beds or working diligently to remediate our soils to make sure that we're producing the healthiest, crop that has minimal or no chemical pesticides. And it is an investment, and it's extra work, it's extra money. So I think that's important to be communicated. And one of the things that we did, like you mentioned, Caitlin, is we came together as urban growers and wanted to make sure that we were communicating that with the entire community, and also with our customer set that each of us cater to or come to us on a regular basis. We took it upon ourselves to police ourselves. So we signed the Urban Growers Pledge. Once we realized that we were all aligned in making sure that we are adhering to safe soil practices and figuring out a way to collectively communicate that to customers. And that is something that came out of, and I should mention, the Food Policy Council, which I'm currently the chair of and Matt served on for many years, working towards making sure that we communicate what we're doing, and we have an inclusive open door policy for the community to bring any concerns to us. And one of those concerns was our safe soil practices. And we feel like we have addressed that, and we are ready to move on to servicing the community in other ways. And I say we, meaning the Food Policy Council, and then our urban growers. One of the working groups from the Food Policy Council is the Urban Growers working group that works to address these issues and continue to police ourselves.
Great. Thank you for that overview, Allison. And if you'd like to dive deeper into the Food Policy Council, let me know in the chat box. For now, I'm going to move to our next question. Do you have any tours at any of your sites? So are your farms open to the community? And I guess related to that, do you offer volunteer opportunities? Why don't we touch on both of those at the same time? So Tim, I'll invite you to share first.
Sure. Because as I mentioned, we have a very small staff team and we have over 100 sites. We don't offer specific tours. Something that I myself am happy to do is if folks reach out to us and ask questions, I can connect whoever contacts us to whoever the lead contact we have at the garden is, and they can kind of arrange their own visit because at each of these sites, right, we have someone who's the lead contact in the community who lives right in the neighborhood. So that's something that we can do. One of the other things that we encourage folks to do is to check out some of the locations during events like the East Side Garden Walk in Buffalo, where a lot of the kind of more established and active gardens and urban farms will be participating. So that's an opportunity to kind of have a more structured, maybe resourced opportunity to kind of tour a bunch of places in the same day. And our office garden, which is on Broadway, very close to kind of the downtown Central Library location, that's also on the East Side Garden Tour. So there are some opportunities, but we don't do specific tours that are scheduled. As far as volunteer opportunities, it's a little bit of the same thing. We do have volunteers or potential volunteers who reach out to us and say, hey, I want to, start helping out at a community garden, and we can get them plugged in at the most convenient location to them. We also do have some larger scale volunteer work days in the spring and fall to help gardens who maybe need a little bit more of an assist, whether they're more newly established or they're gardens that have lost a lot of their active gardeners. We'll bring volunteer groups out to help out to get them, either set up for the growing season or clean up for the fall and winter. So those are kind of sometimes a little bit more random depending on what needs we have in the community, but we also try to arrange those for folks who are interested.
Great. Matt, are there opportunities to visit Five Loaves or volunteer there?
Yeah, much like Tim said, there's the Garden Walk Buffalo on the west side. And then also this year, Gardens Buffalo Niagara put together an urban farm tour day at the end of August, where tour the urban farms. For us on a weekly basis from April through October, so we just wrapped that up for the year. We have a volunteer day from 11 to 1 every Saturday during the season. So yeah, that's another great time for people to come out and get to see the farm and experience.
How about it, your farm, Allison?
So we have lots of visitors who just stop by on a regular basis just because of, being right in the neighborhood. Folks like to come by and talk. And so that happens. But we really try to, if there's going to be a tour, it's scheduled and it's an event. We don't really set up like a weekly come and tour or monthly. It's usually in some type of partnership, like we did the urban ag tour and things like that. So folks are welcome. It's just a little difficult because like Grassroots and Five Loaves, we have limited staff and we're super busy, especially during the time when folks want to come and tour and see what's happening. So it's difficult, but it can be done. We never turn anyone away. We just have to schedule it and plan it. And yeah, but same with volunteers. We usually prefer to have our volunteers like work with us on a food giveaway. Sometimes folks like to come and help us harvest early in the morning, which is fine. So again, it just has to be discussed and scheduled.
Thanks, Allison. I have a question for Tim. How can people get connected with the Therapeutic Gardening Initiative?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Just email me and I'll get you connected because I think that's something that we are definitely interested in hearing from folks who want to be part of that committee. We have a committee that meets monthly to discuss kind of the initiatives and the projects and different activities that might be being put on in our gardens. And I think most recently they just put on an event with kind of counselors that show up with or specifically focused on folks who are who kind of struggled with people who, or friends and family who died from gun violence. So there are sometimes specific kind of focus groups or communities that are kind of the focus of some of the activities they do. I don't know what it'll look like in the winter, but the monthly planning meeting is the best place to learn more about kind of what's going on and see if there are places to either plug in or attend some of these activities for either your own benefit or other people you know. So shoot me an email. I can get you connected.
Great. Thanks, Tim. And again, as a reminder, everyone's contact information will be on the last slide. We have a question about pests. I think this might be, we could just cover pests in general, but what pests are the most challenging for you or your gardeners to deal with on the farm? And Tim, I guess we'll start with you again.
Sure. And I think Matt and Allison might have a deeper understanding of this because they see their farm day in and day out, of course. But for me, I think I've only been at Grassroots Gardens for 1 year, and my guess is it varies from season to season. This year, I think I heard the most complaints about aphids really bad. I think partly because of humidity and the warm temperatures, but also a lot of Japanese beetles were really destroying people's crops this year, and we saw that a little bit in our own office garden as well. But my guess is next year might be a little different. Also, aside from pests, I think disease was a rough one this year. There was a lot of mildew that killed a lot of the squash and cucumber for a lot of our gardens. So I think it depends on the weather and the year.
Totally. Yeah. Matt, what were your challenges this past year?
Yeah, very similar. And like Tim said, it does change from year to year. Some years it's flea beetles on our brassica crops. This year, yeah, I've seen trouble with the aphids. But then also with some of the wet weather we had, and downy mildew powdery mildew show up in some different crops. So yeah, some of our cucumbers, unfortunately, the sour cucumbers that we're growing, lost pretty much that whole patch there. Yeah, we were trying like some different varieties of basil that had some of them. They all got downy mildew, but there was one variety in particular that actually survived, even though it was at a low grade, lower down on the plant. It didn't spread. So later than we had more downy mildew in the basil than we usually had. So, but yeah, different pests, different years. Groundhogs I'll throw in as a pest, as well as, of course, rats, especially in our tomato house. Usually not a huge problem, but a little bit.
Allison, was there any particular pest bubbling up to the top of your list?
Pretty much the same. We last year, which I don't kind of understand or have an explanation, we struggled with the Swede midge a lot, and then this year we didn't see it as much, but we had the aphids and the powder and downy mildew. So yeah, and I think that it's important to communicate that sometimes we have higher struggles when you're not using as much chemical pesticide, but then there are farms that do use chemical pesticides, and sometimes these diseases become immune to those pesticides, so they have to be heightened. So it's just an ongoing struggle in farming. And like Tim was saying, every year we see what we're going to face and try to figure out ways to overcome it or just deal with it.
Yeah, and I'll just add, as someone who works with farmers to kind of troubleshoot some of these pest problems, I have yet to meet a farmer that hasn't had, a pest or disease issue in any given year, and it's always going to be something different. In part one of this presentation, I talked a lot about the different practices that these urban farmers are following that actually help disease and insect pest management. Things like crop rotation. Matt mentioned use of resistant varieties, and I know many of these farms and gardens are growing a lot of different native plant species, a lot of flowers, and all of those plants can support, and they do support, a lot of our natural enemies. And so even though they are battling different pests, they are supporting natural pest control as well. So yeah, check out part one if you want to learn more about that. Let's see if there are any more questions in the chat box. So this might be, Allison, I know that you mentioned this already, cooking classes. Could you share a bit more about cooking classes and maybe when those are offered and how someone could take one? And if that's applicable to 5 Loaves, Matt, feel free to jump in as well.
Yeah, so we have over the years received such a high demand for classes. A lot of times we assume that folks know what our crops are when we're taking them to market. A lot of times people don't. And there's sometimes apprehension about sharing the fact that folks don't know what certain crops are. And then if they don't know what they are, they certainly don't know how to prepare them. So, like I mentioned a while back, initially we thought, oh, we're going to provide access and we'll be solving a lot of problems. And, that just is the beginning, because then it's education about what crops are, their nutritional value, and then how to prepare them. So in 2022, we are going to be increasing the number of cooking classes that we offer, cooking demonstrations. One of the things that we like to do is when we do the demonstrations, we like to offer the products so that folks can do that with us or at home on their own. Prior to COVID, when we were doing our events in person, folks were able to take home what we were demonstrating. So as a result of COVID, I partnered with another person to create Farm to Fork, where folks will be delivered the boxes that have the ingredients in it, and then they can join us via Zoom. Hopefully we can get back to more in-person events. And so we're working on that, and we're working on that schedule for 2022. So folks can check out our website at the beginning of the year between January and March, when we're really putting dates behind our schedule. Like, as of now, we know what we're going to do. We just need to put dates and times behind it.
Great. Matt, does 5 Loaves offer any cooking classes or other types of workshops?
So most of the stuff that we do with that is focused on the youth internships that we have. There's also, there are groups that use the kitchen space to teach cooking classes, but they're not like officially sponsored by the groups that do classes out of our kitchen.
And Tim, I don't think your office has a kitchen space for cooking classes. Maybe I'm wrong, but
you are correct. We do have a workshop series that we put on with Urban Roots, which is a cooperative kind of garden store on the west side of Buffalo, and Massachusetts Avenue Project. We do that through the winter and early spring, and sometimes there are food preparation classes involved in that, including like canning or making how to make fire cider. But I don't think there have been specific food preparation classes in the recent memory. I'm guessing in years past, maybe we've partnered with other folks to do that, but not since I've been here.
Thank you. So I think we are We have about 5 minutes left. I'd like to make time for one more question, and not seeing anything stand out in the chat box. I'd like to have our panelists share how we as consumers and neighbors can help support your organization. So we talked about volunteer opportunities. You mentioned, where we can find some of your products. So I guess in general, like, how can we help to advocate for urban farms and community gardens in our municipalities? It might not be Buffalo, since this is open to Erie County. We might be located somewhere else. So I guess what is your advice for helping us to help you?
I can start, Caitlin, if you don't mind. I
Yeah.
think that if you have the opportunity to speak with your elected officials, let them know either you want to see more or you want to support urban farming, or like you said, since it's open to the whole county, say it's West Seneca or Williamsville, wherever, if you want to see more gardening and growing locally, that needs to be expressed to your local officials, because they're the ones who can support like either leasing, offering land or selling land to growers and farmers. They're the ones who can support setting up farmers markets that are no cost or low cost. So, yeah, talk to your elected officials, send them letters or text messages or whatever you feel is appropriate and you're comfortable with, depending on that relationship. Or that could be a way to start a relationship with an elected official. Let them know that, why don't we have farms or gardens or farmers markets? And if you do, how can we make them stronger? And you can also get involved with the Food Policy Council.
Matt, Tim, anything you'd like to add to that?
I would say, yeah, also just patronizing the farms that are there. Yeah, going to farmers markets for sorts of and local co-ops that are distributing things like that. So yeah, having your purchasing dollars also help support the folks that are doing is really helpful. But yeah, definitely also, yeah, following up with elected officials to make sure that, yeah, local food production is a priority. Policy makers.
Yeah, I definitely echo. I think Allison and Matt hit kind of the most important part, which is just talking to the folks who do have the power and decision-making ability to impact a lot of the immediate policies that affect urban farms and community gardens. I think another piece that is maybe more indirect, but really important in my opinion, is talking to people about kind of the impacts. Even though I think urban farms and gardens are starting to get more attention in the last maybe decade or so, there are still plenty of folks who maybe, walk past, at least in Buffalo, walk past these different lots and may not necessarily be aware of what's going on. And the more awareness there is out there that, hey, here are spaces where you can actually grow your own food, you can, cultivate it from seeds, and you can share it with the community. I think that's a really strong community building aspect that, the more folks know about, the more folks who are starting to gain some curiosity about, the more impact it'll have. And also, the more folks who can benefit from kind of the fresh produce, the green spaces, and all the other health benefits that come from these spaces. So talking to folks about kind of what you're learning about it, and then continuing to seek out more information about it, I think is also another step.
Yeah, thank you, all of you. And I think the only thing I would add is, and maybe Allison can briefly touch on this, as a Food Policy Council representative, but the Food Policy Council has recently released their local food action plan, which does detail a lot of different policies that municipalities can add to encourage support of not only urban agriculture, but agriculture and food systems in general. And Allison, is the Food Policy Council still taking feedback on the local food action plan?
So we have put out the food action plan, but it is going to be a document that will remain fluid throughout the years. We have our 6 main focus areas, but that could change. So yes, we want input from the community. This is a document that is for the community. And we got the ball rolling with the council, but as it grows and develops, we want more input from the community. So yes.
Great. Well, I think that that's all the time that we have today. So I just want to thank all of our panelists for taking time out of their day to speak with us about their work. And to everyone that joined us, thank you. I hope you had a good time and you learned something new. If you would like to learn more about any of these organizations, their email addresses are listed to the left here. And they all have websites as well and social media accounts, so it's not hard to find more information out there. And with that, thank you again, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Right. Thank you all so much.